Have you ever noticed there's a gap between the kind of guy a lot of women say they're into and the kind of guy who actually turns their heads? That gap isn't always obvious, but certain patterns keep popping up over and over. And when we're talking about British women specifically, some traits stand out in a pretty surprising way. The first guy on this list is probably not who you'd expect. Topic 1. The quietly confident man. Confidence without performance. There's this common idea floating around that confidence means walking into a room, turning heads, talking loud, and trying to impress everyone. But if you actually watch how things play out in real life, especially in social settings across the UK, a different pattern tends to show up. The guy who radiates security without having to announce it usually sparks curiosity. He's not out there competing for validation, and that's exactly why people notice him in such a natural way. It's like he's already said a ton before he's even opened his mouth. Picture two guys walking into the same pub after work. One makes a point of dominating the conversation, cuts people off, and keeps trying to prove how interesting he is. The other one greets people casually, listens closely, smiles when it makes sense, and only speaks up when he's actually got something worth adding. Funny enough, it's usually the second guy who leaves the stronger impression. That's because real confidence rarely needs to advertise itself. It shows up in the small stuff, like holding eye contact, not rushing when you talk, and being totally fine with silence. This kind of behavior also says something that goes way beyond looks or status. It shows emotional stability. A guy who doesn't feel the need to impress every single minute is basically showing that his self-worth doesn't hinge on getting instant approval from whoever's around. That trait tends to create a sense of maturity that grabs attention in a quiet but rock-solid way. And as important as that quiet confidence is, there's another quality that tends to make it even more powerful once it shows up in a guy's life. Topic 2. The man who has his own life. Purpose before romance. Here's a detail that flies under the radar for a lot of guys. Interesting people are almost always busy building a life that fulfills them, instead of just waiting around for someone else to fill that space. That doesn't mean working non-stop or blowing off relationships. It means having goals, hobbies, friendships, and a routine that actually makes sense on their own. When a guy shows that his happiness isn't riding entirely on a woman's attention, he gives off an independence that's usually way more attractive than any rehearsed line. Think about the difference between a guy who drops his own plans the second an opportunity to hang out with a woman comes up, versus one who just says, easy and natural. I'd love to, but I've already got something going on. How about another day? The first reaction might seem romantic at first glance, but a lot of the time it's basically saying his whole life revolves around that one person. The second one shows balance. It shows there's an actual life happening, with priorities, responsibilities, and interests that don't just vanish the moment a romantic opportunity pops up. And weirdly enough, that attitude tends to earn even more respect and curiosity. This idea shows up in all kinds of everyday situations. A guy who makes time to work out, pick up a new skill, travel, play an instrument, or invest in his career usually ends up bringing those experiences into his conversations and into the way he sees the world. He doesn't need to make up stories to sound interesting, because he's constantly living new ones. And that's exactly where an even rarer trait comes in. It's not enough to just have your own life. Knowing how to genuinely connect with different people within that life is what really makes someone stand out. If this video's already got you thinking about attraction differently, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Our goal right now is hitting 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps more guys find this kind of content. Practical, straight to the point, and based on real behavior instead of tired cliches. If this topic's hitting home for you, join the community and keep learning with us. Topic 3. The socially intelligent man. The man everyone feels comfortable around. A lot of guys think charisma means being the funniest person in the room or the center of attention. In practice, social intelligence tends to work in a much quieter way. It's the ability to read the room, get the rhythm of a conversation, and make people feel at ease without it looking like there's any effort behind it. Instead of hogging every topic, this guy knows exactly when to talk, when to listen, and, most importantly, when to let someone else shine. That kind of awareness builds connections that rarely happen just from looks or status. Picture a dinner with friends where everyone's telling stories at the same time. While some people are busy competing over who's got the most impressive story, there's one guy who asks a simple question and shows real interest in the answer. He pays attention, remembers details mentioned minutes earlier, and responds naturally, without turning the conversation into a competition. Small moves like that tend to leave a way bigger impression than constantly trying to seem fun. People like feeling truly heard, and that's a skill barely anyone develops on purpose. Another key thing is that socially intelligent guys treat everyone with the same respect. They don't completely switch up their behavior depending on who's in front of them, whether it's the waiter, a coworker, or someone they just met. That consistency reads as authentic because it shows that being polite and considerate is just part of who he is, not some strategy to impress one specific person. And even though this skill opens a ton of doors, there's one more quality that tends to hit even harder when pressure or conflict shows up. Topic 4. The calm protector. Strength without aggression. There's a huge difference between looking strong and actually being strong. A lot of guys grow up believing they need to talk louder, win every argument, or flex dominance all the time to earn respect. But real strength usually shows up exactly when there's no need to prove anything. An emotionally stable guy can stay calm while everyone else loses it, and that ability to stay level-headed in tough situations usually leaves a way bigger mark than any show of aggression ever could. Think about a common situation at work or with friends. Someone throws out a provocative comment, hoping for a knee-jerk reaction. While most people fire back in the heat of the moment, this guy takes a beat, sizes up the situation, and picks his words carefully. He's not avoiding the conflict out of fear, but he's also not jumping into an ego battle for no reason. When he decides to stand his ground, he does it calmly and with conviction, without ever needing to raise his voice. That kind of self-control tends to read as maturity, because it shows his emotions answer to him, not the other way around. That same attitude shows up in relationships and everyday life too. Being a protector doesn't mean acting like some hero or fixing every single one of someone's problems. It means being the person who brings a sense of security when things get shaky, who makes decisions without panicking, and who offers stability instead of drama. It's a quiet kind of strength, built through discipline and balance, not intimidation. And as powerful as that trait is, the last profile on this list tends to surprise people the most, precisely because it breaks away from the traditional image of what makes a man attractive. Topic 5. The genuinely curious man. The man who sees more than appearances. Maybe the most unexpected profile on this list is the guy who never stops learning, not because he wants to look smart, but because he's genuinely curious about people and the world around him. Instead of turning every conversation into a chance to talk about himself, he asks questions, listens closely, and shows real interest in whatever the other person's been through. That attitude completely changes the vibe of an interaction, because it makes the other person feel truly understood, not just observed. That curiosity also shows up in how he lives his life. He might be into history, photography, cooking, music, sports, or travel, but the hobby itself isn't really the point. It's that constant willingness to discover something new. Picture a conversation where, instead of trying to impress by rattling off his own achievements, he asks about a place the other person visited, or a book that changed how they see things. Little by little, the conversation stops being surface level and starts building a way more natural connection. The interesting part is that guys like this rarely seem like they're following some technique. They just genuinely enjoy hearing different perspectives. At the end of the day, all 5 profiles on this list have something in common. None of them depend on perfect looks, crazy wealth, or rehearsed lines to make an impact. They all reflect qualities that can be built over time: quiet confidence, purpose, social intelligence, emotional stability, and genuine curiosity. Maybe that's exactly why these behaviors tend to leave such a lasting impression. They're not trying to convince anyone of their worth. They just show it, consistently, almost without even trying. Conclusion. At the end of the day, it's worth realizing that none of these 5 profiles depend on being born with perfect looks or having a millionaire's bank account. They're all built through daily choices, small habits, and the way a man decides to carry himself around people and through his own life. The good news is that anyone willing to grow can develop these traits. So here's the question. Which of these 5 types feels the most like you right now? And more importantly, which one do you think you still need to work on? Drop your answer in the comments. It'll be interesting to see how many guys have already realized that real attraction usually comes from attitudes almost nobody ever talks about. If you're into content that digs into behavior, psychology, relationships, and personal growth for men, no miracle promises, just practical stuff. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss the next videos and can keep picking up strategies that might make a real difference in your social life and your relationships.